Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome to From the Ashes. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay, and I'm really excited for today's episode. I'm sitting across from a good friend and a psychotherapy group mate, Corey Flanders, talking about one of my favorite topics that I wish we talked more about, which is kind of the darker side of spiritual practice, specifically meditation and the Buddhist community. It's something that I experienced, during my time at Naropa and a little bit afterwards, of seeing the human side of divinity, right? The human side of these big communities was kind of shocking to me. And I can't wait to hear more about personally Corey's experience and to have him share that with you. So Corey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here. Yeah,
it's great that we get to meet each other in this different arena. I mean, we've done group together where we're both kind of like regressed little babies, trying to struggle.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, it feels nice not to be regressed in front of you, Mark.
Right? Yeah. We can finally just share what we're passionate about.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for this. So as we kick it off, as you know, in this show, we talk about the From the Ashes story, which is the idea of when you got knocked down, thrown your face in the ground and had to get back up stronger, learn some lessons along the way. So I'll kick it over to you. What's your From the Ashes story?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. As I was thinking about doing the podcast with you, Mark, I really appreciate the invitation. I think really what's been coming up for me a lot is this idea of the dark night of the soul. I was so hopeful when I finally got into Buddhism, sort of discovered it for myself. I've been struggling a lot in my 20s. I was living in Portland at the time, just drinking a lot and just struggling with meaning. I felt like my life, in a way, ever since sort of middle school, was a crisis of meaning. One thing led to another. My life wasn't working. I was getting really desperate. At one point I picked up a book. I actually was walking by this bookstore called the Looking Glass Bookstore, and they had a display of just one book. There's dozens of them. And it was the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. And I happened to be walking by, and I walked by the display. I didn't really even look at it. And something sort of grabbed me and turned me around and made me go back. And I went back, I saw the book, picked it, went inside, bought it, and brought it home and read the book. I went through it in just a few days. I'd been in just such a sort of a spiritually dark place, just sort of existentially dark. And read it, and I just had a lot of, just a beautiful response to it. It was very cathartic for me to read. It felt like all the messaging that I had been receiving as I was growing up, messaging about, I could be anything I wanted if I just tried hard enough, messaging about that I should be wanting to be rich. I should be wanting to be super successful. But when I would ask somebody, I asked my parents, why? Why do I have to get good grades? There was never a clear answer. They didn't seem to know either. They just knew that I should be doing that thing. So when I started to read that book, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, it was, right there, right up in front of the messaging was, we're going to die. You're only on this planet for so long. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with your time and your energy? And it was like a breath of fresh air for me to finally, feel like somebody was speaking truth to me.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I'm curious if you can say more about that existential emptiness, the crisis of meaning that you were talking about. I can imagine a lot of people, a lot of listeners feel that, right? Feel like, just like you said, they're doing the things because they're on the checklist, not because there's any purpose attached to it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, I'm sure you do too, Mark, a lot of people in my practice as a psychotherapist, they come in here with just this very issue. We don't do emotion very well in our culture. We don't really talk about how we're feeling deep down. We don't teach kids how to do that. So I think people end up going through the motions and like, what's that phrase? Like climbing a ladder, like climb the ladder of life only to find out that it was leaning against the wrong wall. So there's just something about that. Like I felt like there was, I loved life, as a kid, I was filled with joy. And then, that seemed to just leach away over time. So that by the time I was, in middle school and beyond, teenage years, I couldn't get the girlfriend I was supposed to have. I couldn't do the social thing like other kids were doing. I didn't fit into the cliques. So, I just didn't really have anybody around me to help me know what to get out of life or what life was about. Yeah. So from that perspective, it was I think it just graded and weighed on me over time.
I think that paints a really great picture. So you see this book, you read it, you devour it. What next?
Yeah. So, it was such an important thing, so cathartic, as I said, so much so that 2 weeks later, I hopped on a plane. I went to France. I was studying with Sogyal Rinpoche, the writer of the book, learned meditation for the first time. It was so compelling. Not only, like I said, was the messaging there, but we have to understand about meditation that meditation isn't about messaging. It's about direct experience. It's about these traditions that different meditation styles come from are really about freedom. And it's about finding joy in life and meaning and taking advantage of, our human condition. So, going there, I was learning how to tap in. Meditation, as it was taught, was teaching me how to access inside of myself these deeper layers. And I started to realize or catch on to the idea that it might be within me, right? That there was something there for me. But, I know that the podcast is not called you found everything, Ray, right? It's called Up from the Ashes. So the problem started to come in, I think, after I had returned to the States and struggled to try and put this meditation practice into good use. And in that process, I ended up getting involved with a spiritual community, a Tibetan Buddhist community for about 13 years. And that's when things really started to, there was a lot of good stuff there too, but I got caught up in focusing on the wrong things during that period. So, I guess one of the messages that I want to kind of impart here is that oftentimes people misperceive what meditation is about, and they use meditation. Let me just use myself as the example. I started to use meditation to fill the hole that was inside of me. So yes, it was giving me a direct connection. Yes, it was providing meaning, but there was also some part of me that was like, oh, wow, here's my thing. Here's my thing that now maybe everybody will start to validate me for. Here's the thing that I can sort of wear an identity that I could wear on my sleeve that would signal to people who I was, and that those people would then, give me the kind of feedback that helped me feel good about myself. The other thing I found myself doing a lot of was not letting go of this dream of perfection, which I think is related to feeling empty on the inside. So it's constantly dreaming oh, I'm going to be this thing. When all my problems have ended, things will feel good. And so sort of pushing and using meditation to try and make that sort of thing happen. This vision of enlightenment, the enlightened one, the stories are all about Buddha becoming enlightened. And then, it kind of looks like from the outside, right? All his problems went away. He was the awakened one. Everybody went to him and he gave the right answer to everybody. And everybody loved him and revered him. And I was like, oh, that's what I want. I want to be loved. I want to be revered. I want to have the right answer for everybody, which was just my mind's way of trying to figure out my way out of pain.
Right. Like you want to belong. You want to feel important. You want to feel wise and safe. Right. If you're the leader of that group, if you're the wise guy, sitting on the deer skin, right, no one's going to leave you.
Right. That's right. And nobody's going to leave you. Exactly. And I think, I was also looking for, a different kind of father figure, let's say, somebody who wasn't going to leave me. And so in my life in the community, I was also projecting onto the person that was at the front of the room, the guru. I got caught into sort of the guru trap, where now I'm starting to chase after him to get his validation. I'm starting to do things in order to, be accepted by more deeply by him. And that was the vision for myself too. Like, oh, when I get to his position, I'm going to have people like me who look at me with the same sort of starry eyes. And it is this sort of fantasy of never being left and always being a part of something deeper. But there's also avoidance of, the dynamics that make us human and make life hard.
Well, so I'm curious, were you aware of this at the time, or was anything of that coming up in your practice, or did this happen in retrospect when you were looking back after making the change?
Yeah, it's mostly retrospective, I think. I think I think I got lost in it. Like I couldn't really see my own functioning. And one of the things that I think is interesting about meditation is actually all the information is there. Like if I was able to look clearly now when I look back and I see, I was filled with fear. I was filled with longing. I was terrorized inside myself that somebody, this imposter syndrome, right? Somebody's going to find out that I wasn't doing meditation the right way, or I wasn't getting to where I wanted to be. I wasn't enlightened enough to end up taking on the kind of role that would have, found me with followers or something, So there was always this, this deep unhappiness was still with me. I think a deep kind of emptiness, a lack of identity was still haunting me, but I was using what they call, spiritual materialism. I know you know a lot about that from your time at Naropa, just sort of like leaping over my problems and trying to avoid them through spiritualizing everything. So I was kind of a bit of a mystery to myself.
Right. Well, I think that's really common with people, especially, well, I guess I'll say, especially with American Buddhism, but quite frankly, I haven't had too much experience outside of America, but I guess I see it a lot here of becoming like the Buddhist character, or becoming the enlightened character, or kind of taking it on almost as like a fashion or a style. Right. And it sounds like that trap hooked you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Hook, line, and sinker. And doesn't, our American, way of thinking and being in the world, right, is sort of about this, becoming, so the messaging, I don't know exactly how it is in the old country necessarily, but we sort of import these traditions and we Americanize them, and it's happening all around us right now, with mindfulness and meditation. It's like, you too can become your best, most awesome self, so it's easy to fall into that trap, I think, and miss the point of meditation.
Yeah. I know that happened a little bit for me, because I think at least in American culture, right? Like my first exposure to meditation or mindfulness was like kung fu movies or comic books, right? It was like this hero character that can like punch through trees, or like, an airbender or whatever, right? Like that was what I originally thought the thing was about. And I went to Cambodia for, about a month or so. And I remember talking to them about the monks, and there were people that like looked like the airbenders, right? Like shaved head, monk, orange robe. And the normal Cambodian people, the average folk, were like, yeah, those people are bums, right? Like they weren't like revered, I think, in the same way that type of like, Far Eastern character is in American culture, which I thought was really fascinating.
Right. Yeah. And, and then like add into like, Star Wars, that whole culture. And, it's like, being spiritual had its like kind of badass side, karate movies and all of that. Yeah. So it's like, I felt like a Jedi, and I wanted to be a Jedi. I didn't want to be a schlub.
Right. You want to be magical. Yeah.
I didn't want to pump gas. I didn't want to sell fucking insurance. I wanted to be magical. Yeah. I wanted to be above it all. Yeah.
So how did it come crashing down? Like, when did you make that break out from it?
Yeah. Well, my time there and for those 13 years culminated in a series of 100-day retreats. So I had been doing a hell of a lot of retreat, and it sort of culminated into this a situation where I was down in Texas on a piece of property, and we were trying to put together, a situation where we could go in and out of retreat 100 days at a time, like every fall for 100 days. So, I could tell myself a lot of stories, or let's say avoid these inner feelings I was having and that I was repressing. But if you put yourself in an 8x12 room for 100 days, there's only so much avoiding you can do, so even in the first 100-day retreat, it was like an experience of torture. Like, I didn't really want to be there. I didn't want to be doing the things I was supposed to be doing, like 100,000 prostrations, full body prostrations, which is where you fall down on your face, stretch all the way out, and then pull back up to standing, and then back again and again. But I still tried to, figured out a way to avoid and ignore, what was happening for me. So by the time the fourth one came around, I was struggling so mightily and was so sort of terrorized by the process, and I had lost myself. I didn't feel like I could really fit there anymore. I couldn't stay with the culture that had been built up there around the guru and all of that. So by the time the end of the fourth 100-day came around, it just became clear that I needed to move on. And luckily it was just in time, because the entire community had started to kind of fray and fall apart. So that's kind of how I ended up out of it. But the ashes part was that it took a very long time to gel back up, because I felt like my psyche was in pieces, and I had just done a lot of, it had been traumatizing as much as it had been valuable.
Yeah, that's really interesting. When we get on the other side of a commercial break, I want to hear a lot more about maybe the sickness in the community, how it fell apart, what was going on there that you saw after that, last retreat, and then how you brought yourself back up. For those listening out there, if you're enjoying this podcast, helping us out, sharing it on social media, sending it to somebody who you think might be in a similar situation, or someone that might relate to what Corey is talking about, is really helpful as we're building up our audience and trying to get this message out there to other individuals. So tune in, hang tight, listen to some commercials, and we will catch you on the other side of the break.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY www.teachable.com.
Where can you listen to some of the world's top life coaches ready to dish out success tips and entrepreneurial guidance? The Voice America Empowerment Channel will do just that. Whether it's personal growth, building a better business, or inspirational life stories, make it a daily habit to tune into our programs. From weight loss and personal branding to law of attraction and increased happiness, you'll find it every day at voiceamericaempowerment.com. The Voice America Empowerment Channel. It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay, and I'm sitting with Corey Flanders as we're talking about his experience of, existential dread, existential emptiness, finding the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, studying with the author of that book, which I didn't know. That's pretty cool that you went all the way up the chain. Mm-hmm. Diving into Buddhist community and then seeing it fall apart, seeing some more difficult realities. You were talking about going on these 400-day retreats and noticing by the end of it, I guess some of the sickness in the guru mentality or some of the group dynamics. I'm curious what you were seeing by the end of that stint there. What turned you off to the whole thing, the whole game?
Yeah, well, that question makes me just think about like groupthink and sort of cult issues. This sort of guru devotion or guru worship, that whole thing. There's something about adhering to these traditions and it's like we import the messages, right? So for instance, in Tibetan Buddhism, right, is this idea of guru devotion. And in order to be a good student, you have to do everything that the guru says. Once you find spend some time finding a guru. And once you've figured out that this guru is for you, your job is basically to do what he or she says. And to sort of trust in their intuition and their guidance to help you along the path towards spiritual freedom, let's say. But there's a little bit of a problem with that in that there's ample opportunity to stop listening to yourself. If the ego, in Buddhism, a lot of times they'll talk about the ego, right? The ego is sort of the bad guy. So if the ego has its grasp of us, right, and our resistance is ego driven, then it's within our benefit to not listen to the ego. We're trying to train ourselves how not to listen to ourselves. And there's this whole whole culture of letting go of the ego, letting go, be free of it. Don't let it grasp a hold of you. So I think that there was a way in which I took that to heart so deeply and swallowed it so fully that my intuition about things not being right, I was overriding that. And, any part of me that was making a question in my mind, I was like, okay, that's just my ego. Let me put it out. What I've got to be doing here is following the guru. But unfortunately, gurus, lamas, and teachers, they still have their own stuff. And so, then we fall into the trap of, spiritual communities where, teachers are under the sway of power or wielding power, unhealthily. Of course, there's also sexual abuse and other things that happen in these communities. It hadn't sort of reached that pitch in ours, but certainly we were unhealthy. We were an unhealthy, toxic community, and it was getting worse, not better. So that's kind of what I've been noticing happening there. So it was not only myself, not being able to just attend to the practices I was supposed to be doing, quote unquote, supposed to, but also the community itself, I think, was kind of falling apart.
Yeah, that dynamic is what I think prevented me from joining those communities. I mean, from my own personal background, I have a really strong anti-authority streak. So the whole thing of devotion practice, I was like, nah, like not for me. But also, I think that was colored and reinforced by, the history of Naropa and Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who incredible writer. I mean, his book, like my version of your Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, was Shambhala, Sacred Path of the Warrior. A girlfriend sent that to me, and that just blew my mind, open. I was like, oh my God, like this book is written for me. That being said, right, I mean, Trungpa Rinpoche had this history of, he went to sexual abuse, right? He was an active alcoholic, right? There's times where he would be so drunk that they would have to like wheel him in a wheelchair to give a talk. He wasn't able to stand. He died of alcoholism. Yeah. And some of my teachers at Naropa would just justify it, right? Of like, oh, well, we can't understand the way that the guru is doing, or maybe here's like a lesson from his alcoholism, or because he was having sex with, his chosen consorts, there's a deeper meaning. And I just didn't buy that. I was like, he's still a person. He still is being corrupted by power, and the justification was very disturbing to me, quite frankly, of how people were trying to bypass, spiritual materialism, spiritual bypassing what was like clearly problematic, hurtful behavior.
Right. Yeah. There's this whole this whole concept of skillful means in Tibetan Buddhism, and it's sort of used to kind of justify all sorts of behaviors on the side of the guru or the lama. It's like if they're doing something bad and it's bugging you, it's troublesome in some way. Oh, well, it's just their skillful means being employed in order to get your shit, your defensiveness, your whatever it is, up and out of your system. Mm-hmm. So it's like they're doing it for your benefit, And when you're under the sway of that, those communities, it's like at least I totally bought into it. So it was another way of not questioning or stopping the questioning and being like, okay, oh, more. Yes, more. Contributing to your own abuse in a certain kind of way.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, in the Shambhala community, it's called crazy wisdom, which I think is because Trungpa was like beyond skillful means. Like the stuff he was doing was actually crazy. Right. And the idea was like, oh, yeah. I mean, the same thing you're saying, right? It's like he's doing that intentionally to teach you this lesson. And it's just such this roundabout way of justifying these things that are happening. Right. And I think, what you're saying, it's like, what I hear as a member is like, oh, it's your fault. Like, it's your fault you have a problem with this. Right. Like, nothing is wrong about this. You need to look inside yourself and figure out why you have a problem with this.
Right. Or aren't you grateful that, like, you've been given this opportunity to work on this thing that, this sticking point in you, because that's standing in the way of you and being free and, eating a shit sandwich, That's actually a thing in Tibetan Buddhism. It's like, oh, are you enlightened? Well, can you eat a shit sandwich and not be bothered by it? Well, I guess you're not enlightened. It's like, it gets really weird.
Really intense gatekeeping. Yeah.
Really intense gatekeeping. Yeah. And also just a disregard of our humanness.
Yes. That's what you were saying earlier, right? It's this idea of not to feel or not to be affected by things, maybe is more accurate. Right. To be able to be anywhere, do anything, and just have it not affect you. I don't know if that's what enlightenment is, but I think it does get corrupted into being that, into feeling that, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to have any feelings. I'm not going to, right? I'm just going to be above everything.
Right. Yeah. And I guess, something that's kind of coming up for me too, Mark, is that I guess I just want to say too, that I still meditate. I've been meditating for 25 years. I've been working with different teachers and, I'm involved with a different community now. I'm not involved with it in the same way. And it's not the same type of community, but, I just want to also just, sort of counterbalance that message that I do think that meditation is the highest form of human art. It's the sort of the pièce de résistance of what we've done as human beings. So I just also want to counterbalance that message too.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, for listeners out there, I have a daily practice too, right? Right. I think we're talking about the human side and the group dynamic side and the darker side of it. But I think the practice, similar to you, is incredible. I mean, it's really it has been life changing, continues to be life changing for me.
Right.
So let's talk about that, right? So how did you How did you come back from that big shock experience, and how did you integrate spiritual practice into your life in a more healthier way?
Yeah. I think, I think the biggest piece of it was having to grow up, like coming out of that spiritual community. I hadn't really been doing myself any favors. Like I hadn't, developed a career. I didn't have any savings. As a matter of fact, I had debt. I had a lot of wonderful experiences during that time. I went on pilgrimage a lot. I traveled the world. Loved doing retreat for the most part. But once I left, I didn't have, I felt like I had no ground to stand on. So it was a very slow process of learning how to trust myself again, learning how to trust inner voices of intuition and my critical thinking skills, learning how to trust people in relationship, and just going sort of step by step. And sometimes it felt like I had no movement on the path forward. Like there was nowhere to go. And sometimes, it just seemed like it took for a very long time. So, like when I first came back, actually, strangely enough, after that last 100-day retreat, I ended up living in Manhattan, of all places, for a year. I was dating somebody at the time. And then on the heels of that, I ended up in my own apartment here in Providence, where I still live. And this is about 10, 12 years ago. And I remember just almost being like frightened to exist. I felt like I didn't know how to meditate anymore. I was going back to school. I was starting to go to graduate school, but I didn't really know how to meet people. I didn't know how to develop good relationships. I was certainly not sure if I could, get through school. And I was also really connected to this identity as a meditator. So I was like sort of forcing this notion inside myself that I should be a lama. I should be teaching meditation. I should be doing this, because otherwise, what's all of that for that I just went through? So I think, it was a slow process. And to be quite honest with you, and this comes from somebody who was very avoidant of relationship, which I think contributed to part of the problem in the first place. So one of the things I was avoiding was a kind of relational intimacy. That it was finding, developing a relationship with a woman who's now my wife, and slowly learning how to let that in with the help of therapists and others. That's been the thing that's been more grounding and healing for me than anything else, actually.
Yeah, can you say more about that? I mean, that's something that I'm currently working through, as you know, from our time in group. But I would love to hear more about what that process was like for you, and how it relates to your journey at large.
Yeah, I guess what I'd say about it is, I was afraid to be seen. I think my search for a guru, let's say, was a way of me trying to find a better relationship than I had with my dad when I was growing up. My dad's a nice guy, he's generous person, so I don't want to throw him under the bus, but it was just a situation in which I was thirsting for more. And that's what sort of latched me into this sort of this spiritual community. And then on the other side of it, I didn't feel like I had the ability to trust that I was going to be seen or met or cared for. And it was really scary. And I had been, I don't know if this is the same for you, Mark, but I'd been in a bunch of relationships and prior to getting into Buddhism and abandoned them like pretty quickly. Like I could maybe only last for like 3 months, maybe 4. And then I would start getting real itchy, So there was something about this woman. I met her in a yoga class. And luckily, she had been through something similar in a Zen community for many years that she lived at. So we had something to talk about. So I could sense that there was something there for me. And then it was just finding the right therapist to help me withstand the fear that our intimacy brought up in me. But learning how to be cared for and held by her healed a lot of those wounds. That's a big piece. Of course, having my son, Liam. Hello, Liam. He's 7. And I know he's listening. Having, my son and her, that was the biggest piece, I think, of my healing. But then also finding an appropriate meditation practice and a tradition to belong to that was a little bit more conducive to who I was psychologically, at least at that stage of my life. I think those two things together are the most important.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. I mean, that's what I'm trying to work on with the person I'm dating now and in group as well. And with my therapist, is trying to let other people in and be relational. We talked a little bit during the break about what brought me to meditation. And I think it's relevant here, where I was coming off, 2.5, 3 years of really intensive drug use and a lot of chaos, a lot of hurting myself, hurting other people, breaking promises, destroying relationships. I mean, just like total nightmare, run. And for me, the draw of meditation wasn't the enlightenment piece. It was the control piece of just sitting down, shutting up, staring at a wall, because I had lost complete faith in myself. And I was like, I need to be contained. I need to be safe. I do not trust almost anything that I even thought, right? Forget about do, thought, perceived. I had shattered my experience of myself and my trust in myself. I remember thinking, because I'm also a nerd, of thinking of when the Hulk gets crazy, in the comics, sometimes they just take him in a helicopter and throw him in the desert so he can just punch cactuses until he calms down,
Yeah.
And that's where my mind went. I was like, I need to just separate myself out from everything. But that's very lonely, and I think meditation, at least for me, my dark side of it was alone. I could just be alone, and I could justify being alone. I could justify not becoming intimate or vulnerable with people or opening up. And I was just sitting and I was doing this higher order thing, this thing that I do still value, obviously, but it justified a lot of that isolation, and I think helped me double down on some of my avoidant patterns that I hear you talking about as well.
Well, it's these things have their season, right? It sounds like, at the first part of it, that, you really did need the containment that it was giving you. Yeah. So, sometimes it's we have to know when to shift as our needs shift. And that's also hard if you can't see yourself.
Right. Exactly. And it's also hard if you, in your situation, if you're in a community that's really all moving forward, in one direction and being oh, I don't know if I want to go this direction anymore. I think it's tough for people, right? It's what is it? It's the investment fallacy. That's not the name of it, but the thing of oh, I've done this for a long time. I can't back away. Right. Which it sounds, which I hear you talking about too, of just kind of being stuck in the momentum of it all.
Right. How, if I just back out of it, what does everything I've done mean?
Right. And who am I? Right. What's my identity if I'm not this Buddhist guy? Right.
Yeah. I put it all in black. Yeah.
Well, as we move into our next commercial break, we're going to be talking about if you're a listener out there and you feel connected to Corey's story, he's going to have some advice or some practices or something that might help you. We're trying to give away practical information in that last segment. So stay tuned. I can't wait to see where this goes. It's been a great episode so far.
We're making it easier to listen to the Voice America Talk Radio Network live wherever you go on iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android. Download it from the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit marc-azulay.teachable.com. That's Marc, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
For teens, by teens, and about teens. Tune into the uncensored and unedited discussions with young adults on Express Yourself. Every Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time and 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Smart, tenacious teen hosts and reporters from around the country speak up and speak out. Express Yourself. Visit the website for the show to find out more at expressyourselfteenradio.com. And check out the show on the Voice America Empowerment Channel every Sunday. Are you ready to move to your next level? Listen for Empowering Women, Transforming Lives with host Rebecca Hall-Greider. Each show will focus on a central topic with discussion, guests, and your questions being featured. Our show is perfect for women who feel a call in their heart to step out in a bigger, more powerful way in their life and just need some encouragement, inspiration, and practical steps to support them on their journey. Empowering Women, Transforming Lives can be heard live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, with a replay of the show Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time and 4 p.m. Eastern on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Get the news on our shows and other happenings by following us on Twitter. Find us at Voice America TRN or twitter.com/Voice America TRN.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Marc Azulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@marc-azulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Marc Azulay. So, Corey, we were talking in the pre-show about, you're a therapist now and you work with a lot of clients that are in a similar situation to the one that you were describing, that either, meditated and I think your words for are like freaked out, which I totally get, right? Or people that are stuck in these spiritual communities or maybe coming out of them and trying to make sense of, kind of what happened. What would you say if one of those people are listening to this podcast right now, if you relate to Corey's story, what would you want those people to hear?
Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits, actually, of everything that I had gone through is that now one of the niches that have, kind of organically developed in my practice is working with, as you say, meditators in distress, people who have either, got into meditation because they read a book or they went on a retreat or for whatever reason they are having some sort of experience that's destabilizing or scary to them, or they're caught up in something, maybe a community or something, and it's scary. So it's actually work that I really enjoy and I like doing. So what would I say to people? I think the first thing is to reach out to others. Is to not go, rogue and go all the way into something like a community and throw away your old life and your old relationships and those kinds of things. You always want to, I think a couple of times I've talked about, right, your critical thinking skills, your intuition. It's like, don't leave yourself behind. You have those things for a reason, and they're gifts. And I think I'm growing to believe that, if a meditation practice is good and it's healthy and it's in balance, it actually enhances to a great degree who we are. Now, I'm not saying it enhances our selfishness, right? It enhances our egoic insecurities, but sorry, I have guess we're talking about the emergency section.
Right, exactly.
And you hear the alarms.
Ambulance driving by.
Yeah. So anyways, I lost my train of thought there, Mark.
Oh, you were saying to pay attention to your intuition and your inner thoughts, and that those are there for a reason, right? And not to get swept up in the just deference or the spiritual bypassing that you experienced.
That's right. And it's part of, those things are part of what makes us who we are. It's part of our talent set. So I've come to realize that if I'm meditating in a healthy way as part of keeping myself healthy and connected to my deeper self, then I actually feel happier. I feel more grounded, and my life flows better. Whereas when I'm trying to control things, like you were talking about before, then it's not flowing much at all, right? And if you find yourself fighting with yourself or shutting yourself down mentally inside, there's a problem there that you need to question. Yeah,
I think that's really great advice. What do you think are some mistakes that people make early in their practice, or maybe misunderstandings about meditation that people have?
That's great. I think, one of the things that, I think people have a lot of misconceptions about what meditation is. So I prepared a little list, Mark. So what meditation is and what meditation is not. So meditation is not a panacea for your problems. It's not a way to escape and to become, an enlightened Uber person. Bruce Lee. It's not its job. It's not a way to help you achieve your goals that you have in your mind about what you're supposed to be. That's kind of what we're talking about when we say ego. Like, we all have these ideas about what we think is going to make us happy. And if we start to do meditation in order to make that happen, then we're heading down the wrong road. It's not actually meditation is not actually a way to feel good about yourself. This is I think the thing I hear most from people who come to my practice is they'll say something like, oh, my meditation is not working, or I can't meditate. Why? Because I can't stop my mind. I'm not still. I don't feel happy. And if those are the indicators, then people get frustrated very quickly and they end up dropping the meditation. So it's not about making you happy. Now, there may be side products, right, of products of your meditation that include feeling happier, that include feeling more centered and feeling more joy in your life, let's say. But that's a byproduct. It's not the actual reason for meditation. Meditation is actually to bring us in touch with the truth about ourselves and about life. So what you see is the moment you start to meditate, what's rising inside of you is the truth about what's happening for you. And there's something there for you to learn about yourself and to gain some insight into. So the idea of meditation is something that reveals. I think it's something I go back to again and again. I think of meditation as a window. Sometimes more powerful meditations, we could think of it as like a microscope, even electron microscope. Like it helps us peer very deeply into the functionings of our mind. It provides a container, like it did for you, to metabolize our inner experience. So as these things arise and fall away, like oftentimes we're having experiences in our life, right, out in the world, and we're having emotional experiences and other things. There's no way to really contain that. We make it about something outside of ourselves. We sit with that stuff by ourselves. We don't know how to make sense of it. Meditation provides this sort of containment system where, as we're looking and peering more deeply into ourselves and feeling more about the fullness of who we are, we can actually metabolize some of that. And then the most important thing I think that meditation is it's a means by which we provide a link to the subtlest, inmost, most sort of like transcendental parts of ourselves, what in Tibetan Buddhism we call like the absolute, self or absolute love. And when that linkage is made and strengthened in a daily way, we receive a great benefit from that. We again, there's this kind of flow. We feel like we're more right in our own skin. We feel more centered, and our natural intelligence and some of these talents, like our intuition and our natural talents and things that we want to be doing in the world can come to the surface and be enhanced. So it's just important to start to see what some of meditation is and what some of it is not.
Yeah, I really like that last point of just a way to get to know yourself. But I think what you sign up for, what I'm hearing in your list there, is that you actually know yourself fully, which is not just the happy parts, not just the calm parts, not just the peaceful parts, but the insecurity, the fear, the negative thoughts, the sadness, the grief, right? Like if you're listening and you want to know yourself, know that you're gonna know all of it. You're gonna get all of it if you start to look.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you get the full spectrum. Yeah, I think people often have this sense, I know I did, that, if my life is working well, I should feel this, this, and this, and never this, this, and this. But that's just like cleaving off or pushing away a whole bandwidth of experience. I think that was the other thing too, I think in the past, dozen years or so, that you can't really get out of that. If you're going to be in a relationship, right? You feel the fullness of the chaos of that, and the joys, but also the fears and the inabilities to do things. So meditation is also about being able to see, express, and feel the full bandwidth of human experience, which we all share. Every experience, every one of us has the capacity to feel and does feel in some way.
Right, it's very unifying in that way, which I think directly relates to some of the spiritual teachings of that there is this kind of all one mentality. It's just not, at least it wasn't the way that I thought it was. We are linked in some ways, and I think the experience of meditation can really highlight that in a, for me at least, undeniable way, like true in the true sense of the word way.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And we got to be careful too. For some people, I'm always sort of trauma sensitive about these things. So I just want to let people know that, sometimes we get into a retreat or something and stuff flies up too quickly and it's too intense, and you can stop meditating and you should seek help under those circumstances. Mm-hmm. So just because it's about feeling everything doesn't mean we need to feel everything all at once, including past pain that's hard for us to metabolize.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the way I talk about that with my clients, a lot of them are physically active. And I say, the way you train physically is that you find adequate challenge, like perfect challenge, just like a little bit too hard, but not too hard that you get destroyed or injured. And you just kind of keep doing that. And I think meditation is the same way. Emotional work is the same way. It's finding that perfect level of challenge that helps the organic system to grow.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, we're nearing the end of our episode here. It always goes by faster than we think it will. Sure Corey, as we're wrapping up, where can people find you if they want to contact you, if they want to learn more about you, what you offer, your story?
Yeah, I'd be happy to consult with anybody who, is struggling with meditation or anything. They can find me on my website, which is www.coreyjflanders.com. So Corey is with an E, CoreyJFlanders.com. And I'll also give a shout out to Cheetah House, which is a place here associated with Brown University, and they do good work with meditators in distress, and they have a lot of resources for people, and you can find them at cheetahhouse.org.
That's great. Yeah, for those of you that got questions about meditation, Corey's your guy. That you'd like to direct to the show, you can email us at podcast@mark-azulay.com, podcast@marc-azulay.com. Anything you send to us, I'll send directly to Corey. If you have any feedback about the show, any questions for him, if you want him back for a future episode, we'd love to hear from you if there's anything that stands out. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week on another episode of From the Ashes.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay on From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Meet triumph and defeat and treat those two imposters the same.